how blockchain actually worked until I read that book.
Well, I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, there's actually a video that YouTube 3 Blue 1 Brown does on blockchain. I'll send you a link to the video, but he's a pretty mathy channel, so he gets a bit technical with it. But I still thought he did a masterful explainer of fundamentally what is blockchain doing. It's trying to establish decentralized truth without a central source of truth, and it's literally using the probability of the broadcasts of even if one node is lying, it quickly gets overwhelmed by all the nodes telling the truth about the transaction history, and that's how truth is established.
Okay, sick. Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah, I'll also do link to it because I had an epiphany when I watched it, where it's like, oh, it's literally about how do you get everybody to agree on the truth of an order of a sequence of events without any one node being the agreed upon source of truth for all the other nodes. Like, that's the fundamental technical problem it's solving.
It's like the human condition.
Yes, which actually, I like, somebody was explaining to me true peer-to-peer chat apps and like why, and I suddenly got it, why they're so performance-wise, they don't scale. And he was like, oh, so if you're in a decentralized group chat, you have to remember, you're not actually in a group chat. You're actually in a conversation with 100 other nodes, and it's just an illusion in your client that it's one chat. So every time you send a message, it's actually being sent to everyone. There is no central node everyone is communicating through. So it scales horribly as the size of the group chat goes up.
Love that.
Yep.
I truly do love that.
Yeah, so you're just fighting a fundamental performance issue. We actually have enough people trickling in. I may go ahead and get started in just a second. I need that because I usually lead off my good stuff. Yeah, I can lead off.
Almost done.
No.
It says we're all set.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. Let's just get the.
Josh.
Where are your notes?
Take back control of your hands, or at least software.
Keyword for Pluto? You go to Pluto Legends?
As soon as I read it.
I said I'm just joking.
Okay.
Cool. But I collect a lot of these.
If Louis Robbins has that all the time, you should chat them up if you want.
Yeah. We've been to a number of different products over the last couple of years. So you just gotta be able to. That's okay. Yeah, you should definitely go. I mean, yeah, like, right now, I mean, how that. So it's the meters there, was it kind of like based on Austin?
Yeah, but we get started just in a few minutes. A lot of the
You told us that there were yes, I forget to ask the back
Last month.
How doing all right?
pretty well. All the way from Houston.
Oh, wow. We occasionally get people from other cities, but happy you're here.
Yeah, this is the only, as in, apparently, I looked online, you guys are the only in Texas.
I mean, there is, but they don't.
Oh, well, we were the only EFF for a long time. We actually have a second one here in Austin. I'll be sorry. Yeah. Oh, and Josh is all right, you just we're good. is
Which is
being,
yeah. Kind of right now the
we were trying to put the finishing touches on our new business Venmo because she wanted me to make an announcement for donations, but it's malfunctioning, of course, because of course it is.
We can still direct to the site.
Well, the site is actually, we don't want to do that because that, yeah, I'll just.
I'm sorry, Kevin. How's Maggie doing, by the way?
She's doing all right. I think she's just mostly busy with her new life and new professorships.
Yeah.
She's doing all right, I think. I think she's happy. I finally got the site off her server. I think she's very thankful for that.
Thank God.
I'm familiar with that. How much space set up?
Meetup.
It has like a pipe where it throws out and then another pipe and then there's kind of like a big.
I'm trying to do everything in the internet.
I think you're getting all the way up.
Here we are.
I use the luggage, especially it's like luggage.
I like how you said it might be slow and we kind of, everyone just kind of came in at the same time.
I know, that it's, as I said, I can never predict it. Sometimes it seems fast and sometimes it seems slow. All right, let's see. All right, if you're good, I will go ahead and get going here. Okay, I think we have enough people. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome everyone to the latest monthly installment of the EFF Austin Meetup. My name is Kevin Welch. I'm the current president of the board at EFF Austin. And yeah, old and new faces, welcome all. To those who are new and like, what's EFF Austin? EFF Austin is an Austin-based digital civil liberties advocacy organization. We work closely with Electronic Frontier Foundation, who are based out of San Francisco. They're the nation's oldest and largest digital civil liberties advocacy group. They work to preserve your rights in emerging technological spaces, especially your First Amendment right to free expression and your implicit Fourth Amendment right to privacy. So they're cool people. They've been around 30 years. They fight for things like net neutrality, end-to-end encryption, protecting Section 230 of the CDA, and just trying to make sure that you are free to express yourself and free to protect yourself in digital spaces. They're cool people. I encourage you to learn more about them, go to their website, donate, help their cause, pay them a visit if you're ever in San Francisco. As I said, we work closely with them. We're actually almost as old as they are. We're the oldest member of what they call the EFA, which is short for the Electronic Frontier Alliance. The EFA is a sort of peer-to-peer activist collective of about 100 activist groups all around the United States. We have no formal legal affiliations with each other, and we don't demand strict ideological conformity, but we all kind of generally swim in the same waters and care about similar issues. EFF Austin is the oldest member of the EFA. Although interestingly enough, despite there being 100 groups, for a long time we were not only the only EFA member in Austin, we were the only one in all of Texas actually. Though that has recently changed, where there is now another EFA group here in Austin, our fellow travelers Open Austin, who we actually featured the president of their board, or I forget her exact title, but Liani, who's their current head honcho. She spoke to our meetup last month actually. So yeah, there's two groups in town here if you want to get involved in these sort of issues. They focus more on civic activism than us. We tend to be more broad in our mandate, tend to just span a lot of stuff. We mostly are an educational organization, which mostly takes the form of these meetups, which are the second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. You can find us on various socials if you want to learn more about us. We're on Facebook. We're technically on Instagram, though it never gets updated. We're on Mastodon. We're on Blue Sky. We're still on Twitter for the time being. And of course, we're also on Meetup. And we also have our own website, although I will say right now, the website may not be the best place to get current up-to-date Meetup information. We've been having weird issues with our hosting provider that I am trying to sort out. It is definitely their fault, not ours, so I have to track that down. And also to that end, you will note that there is Normally, I would still tell you to go to our website if you want to donate to us because we have a PayPal link there. Actually, don't do that right now. That is a defunct PayPal link. We actually have a new business PayPal account, but because of the website issues, have not been able to update the link. We were this close to actually having a business Venmo set up for you all to be able to donate to, but we literally last second we're running into a technical issue there. So we'll be figuring that out. But yeah, lots of stuff in progress. Anyway, as I said, primarily educational, have these monthly meetups. We have a number of fun talks coming up over the next several months. Next month, we're going to kind of be doing a bit of a discussion of quantum computers and how those work and some of the cryptography issues around them. Let's see, and then I'm trying to remember. And then we're going to have, in December, we're going to be discussing kind of just threat modeling mitigation from a cybersecurity perspective. January, I don't remember exactly what she's going to talk about, but we're going to have an advocate who advocates on a lot of how digital civil liberties issues affect working class and marginalized communities. So she's going to come in and talk to us about that some. And then in February, we're going to have a very cool digital artist talk to us about making digital art in as few lines of code as possible. So got a bunch of fun talks coming up over the next several months. In addition to our education, we do a few other things. We've been known to occasionally throw cool cyberpunk parties around South by Southwest and other times whenever we can find eccentric millionaires to fund it. So as always, if you know any, send them my way. And we also occasionally have holiday parties as well. We're probably going to tentatively be having actually a co-holiday party with Open Austin, though that is still in planning stages, but stay tuned for that. Finally, we do, of course, like our big brother EFF, we do activism both at the city and state level. We were very involved in the fight over automated license plate readers here in Austin. While we were not able to stop them from coming back, we were able to get much stronger rules around them, including getting how long they keep the data reduced all the way down to just 7 days, which is still way too long, but is much shorter than they wanted to do. And in fact, it's funny I say that because literally today there was a news article about the APD citing that, with the ALPRs we caught 40 criminals. And I'm like, okay, 40 criminals in the city of 2 million while spying on where everybody's going. Real great track record there. So totally worth the violation of our civil liberties. But anyway, so we were involved on that. We're also, along with Open Austin, we're currently involved in trying to talk to the city about the generative AI regulations they're crafting. Believe it or not, so far nothing horrifying we're having to really speak out against. Actually, mostly sane ideas so far, but we're going to stay in discussion with the Technology Commission and the City Council and keep you all abreast as that evolves. And then finally, we do some stuff at the state level as well. We gave testimony on HB4, the big data privacy bill. We've spoken in an expert witness capacity on their attempts at crafting generative AI regulations. So we do a broad swath of things. If these all sound like the sort of things you're interested in and want to get involved in, we're very much a community volunteer-led org, so the only thing stopping us from doing something is you stepping up and saying, I want to make that happen. So by all means, you ever want to give a talk or get any other kind of initiative spearheaded, get with me or one of our fellow board members. There are actually 3 of them here in attendance tonight, including our speakers on our board. So without further ado, I will probably introduce our speaker here and turn things over to him. I guess I'll quickly ask, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share with the community? Events, news, whatever, shameless self-promotions, totally cool as long as you think it might be of interest to this community. No? Man, I guess it really seems post-COVID there aren't as many events in our wheelhouse as there used to be, so we'll keep trying to spin it up. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker and turn things over to him. So our speaker this month is David Hensley. As I already said, David has been on the EFF Austin board for a number of years. An Austin native that uses philosophy, comics, and literature to navigate the growing absurdity of the ever-evolving human condition. David said navigation is through the rebellion of knowledge. Having studied hacktivist movements, blown whistles, and other such events, David aims to help synthesize a path to progress that's accessible to all and that will be paved along cyberspace and the electronic frontier. He's worked in IT for several years while working on his own literary efforts that implement the cross-sectional studies of philosophy, technology, and culture. So anyway, David reached out to me wanting to give us a talk about data cooperatives. And you may be sitting here going, well, that sounds neat, but what is a data cooperative? So using the summary David gave me about the topic, so basically the intro that I will then tee things off for David is, data is a profitable resource that powerful entities mine and siphon every day. This includes personal financial information, medical and biological information, geolocation, psychological information, behavioral, and anything else that can be recorded. More and more aspects of our lives are being digitized, the data being passed around, allowing companies and other entities with power to know more about us than our most intimate comrades. How might we maintain autonomy in the face of this nonstop harvest of the many aspects of our being? Well, David thinks that data cooperatives may be the answer. So without further ado, take it away, David.
Okay. That thing is talking to me. So actually, really curious, show of hands, has anyone here ever heard of a data cooperative, or is this like completely new information for everyone here? No? Okay. Sick. Love it. Cool. So I guess I should start by explaining that I came to this concept while working on my own literary piece. In that piece, it is a novel. The characters live in an extremely advanced and oppressive technocratic society that has neutered consciousness and being to the point to where consciousness is, every aspect of consciousness itself essentially lies behind a paywall. So, as I was working on that piece, I had to look at the dirty details that would lead from here to there, because that piece is my, for lack of a better term, divination of what the future would look like if we didn't get some kind of grip on how things were going now. So, one of the pieces that I read, actually, it was going around earlier, to understand how a data-based economy would work, because this society exists in a completely data-based economy. All currency is data, or all data is currency. It brought me to this piece, Building the New Economy, Data is Capital. It's written by several MIT professors, and it actually discusses how to use data cooperatives in order to, how do I shorten several hundred pages into a few words? How to basically use data cooperatives to streamline how people get compensated for data and how data can be more securely and safely taken care of and handled while at the same time respecting the members of said cooperative. But I'll go into all that in more detail about all that as the PowerPoint progresses. So I kind of divided the talk into 4 different sections. I'm going to start with discussing co-ops. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of the term before, but just a few details just to kind of set the tone for what a data co-op might be. The second section will kind of contextualize what data is, and also how I've come to my Dale Gribble-esque state of mind in regards to the paranoia that has arisen from understanding exactly how data is contextualized in our current version of the human condition. The third section will actually define a data cooperative a little more formally for us. And then the fourth section is going to introduce and discuss a music industry use case that the professors in the piece, in the book that I just referenced, opened the text with. They also discussed a health IT and a legal use case scenario. However, the knowledge compounds as you read the book, so there would be a lot of information that we would need to truly actually have an actual discussion about, the second and third cooperatives. Now, another thing is that the music industry use case, I believe, actually better reflects how us as just typical data creating users, like when we use Instagram or Facebook or make a post or save a note on our phone or whatever, I feel like the music industry use case could best be remodeled to accommodate, a typical just data creating person as, general user. And I'll kind of show that rework in the last slide there. It's after that fourth section's ending. Also, I pace. Is that okay with everyone? Cool.
It's your talk.
Cool. Well, sometimes it's hard to pay attention when someone is moving everywhere around the room. All right, so co-ops. Anyone familiar with what a co-op is? Anyone ever heard of a co-op? Sick. Okay. So, definition of a co-op. It's an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. Cooperatives are democratically controlled by their members, with each member having one vote in electing the board of directors. And some tenets of a co-op: they are voluntary, have open membership. They are under democratic member control, with each member having one vote. There's economic participation by members, meaning that typically the members buy in or provide some kind of investment in order to give the co-op life and allow it to operate, because you need money for things to work in this society. They are autonomous and independent, so that more so means that they aren't, at least on the surface, being heavily influenced by larger actors. However, some of the list of examples of co-ops I'll show you will probably show you that can change. Co-ops provide education, training, and information, cooperation among other cooperatives, and just a general concern for community. So if you're thinking about some of the flaws that could exist within a co-op, I'm so glad you're thinking about that, because that brings me to a very important point that I think that we should consider as we move through this presentation. Solutions and technology are agnostic. They will only work insofar as we as individuals tailor our own metaphysics and internalities in order to properly deal with the issues that we're faced with. No amount of technology is actually going to solve a problem of poverty. That is a societal, philosophical, humanitarian issue that requires metaphysical, philosophical, and humanitarian solutions. You can't build your way out of immaterial issues. So, yes, there are probable flaws with how a co-op even could work. And there are some problematic co-ops. The issue with those issues happened because there were internal human flaws that were not addressed. Technology can help with that, but technology is not the ultimate solution to that. So, also, October is National Co-op Month. Co-op Month has been a nationally recognized celebration since 1964, when the United States Secretary of Agriculture, Orville Freeman, a Minnesota governor, proclaimed October Co-op Month. And it was during this time, basically, if you want to look at the details of all this, but essentially, the US government actually helped to get co-ops kind of off the ground, and then around 71, cooperatives kind of were able to support themselves in making their operations a little more widespread and well known. But truthfully, cooperatives have been around since the 1800s. The thing is, they've been more successful in Europe because of the various laws in the United States that make things a little harder for organizations like co-ops. Some types of co-ops that exists. There are consumer cooperatives, retail cooperatives, housing cooperatives, utility cooperatives, credit unions, or technically banking cooperatives, community cooperatives, work cooperatives. There are all kinds of cooperatives. Any kind of enterprise, movement, thing can have a cooperative. And just to list a few cooperatives, there's Wheatsville, which is a local Austin cooperative. They have great tofu sandwiches, love that place. The Associated Press, very large news organization, provides a lot. It actually provides a wire service to most news organizations in the country. Co-op, Whole Foods, co-op, Ace Hardware, co-op. I'm sorry? Not yet.
Wheatsville.
Yeah, for sure. It started as one though, for sure.
Wheatsville's not anymore?
And Whole Foods is.
Oh yeah.
This is not anymore.
I know, that ties into what I was saying earlier about how, for lack of a better term, or lack of a more PC term, corruption can steer the way that a cooperative or an organization goes. But it started out as a co-op. You have Ace Hardware, you have REI, and then which is like a camping things, and Lena likes butter. So cooperatives can become things like Whole Foods. They can be things like Wheatsville. They can grow with power.
I also feel I must make a sidebar here to say that one of our board members and one of our co-founders, John Bobkowski, ran at least, what was at the time, it may still be, the only web development cooperative, Polycot Associates, based right here in Austin. So, yeah, we like co-ops in EFF Austin.
Glad to hear they're still kicking.
They're still here, as far as I know, though. I think John's retired from working with them.
Was there a question or anything? I feel like I kind of got.
No, I think
Okay.
you addressed, I think people were just saying, disputing Whole Foods' current status.
It's not anymore. It was, but yeah, proving my point. Okay, so that's cooperatives. I'm assuming we don't have any other questions, any comments, any suggestions, any other asides about cooperatives? No? Sugoi. So, data.
The weeb in me approves.
Arigatou gozaimasu. Catch-on. Okay. So, data. According to Google, data has a lot of interesting synonyms and definitions. My favorites are dossier, intelligence, fuel, ammunition. Data is facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. Qualities, characters, or symbols on which operations are performed by a computer, being stored and transmitted in the form of electrical signals and recorded on magnetic, optical, or mechanical recording data. And as I am who I am, you can't go without the philosophical definition. Things known or assumed as facts, making the basis of reasoning or calculation. So I actually was talking to a friend about this presentation, and he didn't realize what kind of data I was talking about when I was discussing data cooperatives. He was under the assumption that it was just some kind of like knowledge-centric consortium. And that kind of accentuated to me how rather disconnected we are from, or rather disconnected many people can be from the just sheer amount of data that we're constantly creating. And that's constantly governing the way that we live our lives, and constantly governing the way that other people are deciding the way that we live our lives. But more on that soon. As I said, we are effortlessly and endlessly creating data at all times. And this is just a result of how our species has evolved and the tools that we've decided to integrate into our livelihoods. And the truth is, it's just going to keep expanding. Like, no one's going to stop using phones. No one's going to stop using computers. I mean, unless something really bad happens. But, I mean, it's just not going to happen. They're effective tools. And I've said a lot of dark, foreboding, rather scary things, or maybe some rather dark implications. And the implications will get darker as I proceed through this presentation. But in truth, I don't think that data and the way that we use data, the way that we can use data, is inherently bad. Like I said earlier, technology and solutions are agnostic, even the way that we use data is. I like that I can go on Amazon, God forbid, and find a list of books that truly do interest me. I like how my music algorithms work because I'm just getting really good music these days. It's convenient, it works, it's given me access to knowledge that I wouldn't have been able to easily access 25 years ago. It's just a matter of, is this worth some of the prices that we're forced to pay? So some of the types of data that are collected to really make us think about the prices that we're paying is behavioral data. Our consumer data, political data, geolocation, health, psychological, romantic, and emotional. All these different things are being tracked, compiled, analyzed. Someone's taking this information and using it to try to further their own ends. I mean, that's just that's just happening. If you refute that, then I would really ask you to really take a look at the world that you're living in. So I'll spare you guys all the details that I can go on about that. But so why so much data? Like I said, furthering people's enterprises, people's goals, people's profit-driven imperatives. We live in a profit-driven society. It's not only accumulating vast, limitless amounts of data, but also invests in ways to accumulate more data, because more data means more opportunities for profit. And the argument could be made that, these profits do lead to us having better, cooler, more interesting tools, but again, at what cost? So, over the last decade, there has been a continuing decline in trust with regard to the handling and use of personal data. People are increasingly aware of the power wielded by social media platforms in influencing their daily lives, such as through advertisements for goods and services purchased online. Think about this. There are a lot of people with gambling addictions and gambling issues. People with gambling addictions and gambling issues, they see ads for these gambling games, they play these games, they keep downloading them, they're having their information taken. I've seen it happen firsthand to people that I know personally. They get sucked into these games and they lose everything that they have, nearly ending up homeless because they are influenced by these advertisements that are preying on them. And that's not to absolve people of their own personal choices and their own, actions, because we are responsible acting agents. But at the same time, when you are goading an addiction, you are pressing neurological buttons that someone is vulnerable to. That is taking advantage of them. Per the Pew Research Center, 91% of Americans agree or strongly agree that consumers have lost control over how much personal data is collected and used. The more gambling games you play, the more advertisement for more gambling games you're going to get. 80% of Americans who use social networking sites are concerned about third parties accessing their shared data. Again, that's from the Pew Research Center. And here are some methods of data collection. We have phone and web applications, your internet history, wearable smart devices, security cameras, automated license plate readers, smart dust and RFID technology. Has anyone here heard of smart dust? Oh, y'all are in for a treat. Has anyone here heard of RFID technology? Okay, yeah, makes sense. We live in Austin, for God's sake. Of course we're going to talk about that. So, and again, I'm going to just focus on the smart dust and the RFID technology because this really accentuates and emphasizes kind of where we're going and how much more data is going to be collected on us as time goes on. And further provide more evidence as to why we might need a data cooperative to protect our existential pieces. So, smart dust, and I'll have a picture pulled up in a second, or a diagram from the UC Berkeley white paper, are basically these very small nano nodes that get spread around an area, and then so those nodes go on to collect optical information and feed that optical information back to a receiver that is held by a user. So it's like having a bunch of little particle cameras just around everywhere. Developed by Berkeley, at least the last I checked, and they were originally more so for military use, but before you say, why would military technology be introduced into the consumer space? The internet was a military technology. It was developed by DARPA, and it later became introduced into the consumer space. Here we are. I am very hard-pressed to believe that given smart dust and smart dust motes continue to develop, those kinds of technologies will be introduced into our everyday life by some way or another. And you might see how in a couple of slides here. This is what it looks like. So you have the person here holding the data receiver And you got these little particles spread out around the battlefield that are surveilling that and telling him, or him, them, she, that that's there. And you have your Black Hawk Apache helicopter spreading out the particles. So, radio frequency identification technology. Anyone go to music festivals or any kinds of festivals receive one of those. And one of those basically emits an electromagnetic field that can allow for interaction with other devices that are tagged as such. And so it seems pretty benign on its own, but I have an example coming up here that shows why this may not be so benign. Any questions so far? Any comments? Does anyone think I sound paranoid and ridiculous? Anyone feel like arguing? Okay, cool.
It does seem like the smart dust is more theoretical at this point, and it's like more of like the Nicklandian politics of speculative horror kind of thing going on, but that's not to say that that's not ever going to be a thing, but also the full implications of the things we have already are plenty terrifying.
Fair.
And for what it's worth, I can certainly confirm there are people who want it to function just how David described and are actively researching it, even if it is not fully viable.
Hot.
Inspired by the book, Do Not Create the Torment Nexus.
All right. So this is a small example from another really good piece that I read. It's called The Filter Bubble Effect. It's by Eli Frazier. As sci-fi author William Gibson once said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. I'm going to take a pause right now, though, and give a shout out to William Gibson. I just finished the Sprawl trilogy, one of the best pieces of fiction I've ever read. Mona Lisa Overdrive is a great, great book. Everyone should read it. It shows up in some places before others, and one of the places this particular aspect of the future has shown up, first oddly enough, is the Coca-Cola Village amusement park, a holiday village theme park and marketing event that opens seasonally in Israel. So, to spare you guys reading this whole chunk of paragraph, you can keep reading this if you want, I'm just going to summarize a little bit. So basically, this theme park gave out those wristbands to its attendees, and then the wristbands somehow were coded with their Facebook accounts, and it allowed them to interact with different objects in the amusement park. And as they interacted with them, it liked the objects for them on Facebook. Let's see. So this one I will read because I feel like this needs to be said out loud. Suddenly it's possible for businesses to track each individual object they make across the globe, affix a chip to an individual car part, and you can watch as the car part travels to the car factory. The car gets assembled, gets to the show floor, and then someone's garage. No more recalling errors with products because it can be traced back to the factory instead of having to recall whole troves of things that are created, batches, excuse me. RFID provides a framework by which a home could automatically inventory every object inside it and track which objects are in which rooms. With a powerful enough signal, RFID could be a permanent solution to the lost keys problem and bring us face to face with what Forbes writer Rehan Salam calls the powerful promise of a real world that can be indexed and organized as cleanly and coherently as Google has indexed and organized the web. This phenomenon is called ambient intelligence, based on a simple observation. The items you own, where you put them, and what you do with them is, after all, a rate signal about what kind of person you are and what kind of preferences you have. In the near future, writes a team of ambient intelligence experts, every manufactured product, our clothes, money, appliances, the paint on our walls, the carpet on our floors, our cars, everything, will be embedded with intelligence networks, tiny sensors, and actuators, which some have termed smart dust. And that is from Eli Frazier's Filter Bubble Effect, which is this piece here. Another really good piece I suggest, this is more so about how we get trapped in our own digitally constructed echo chambers for the sake of people that, not people, for the sake of companies and larger powerful organizations being able to profit from having our attention stuck in the same place and keeping us in this cycle of ourselves. I'm also going to turn to the Messiah, Shoshana Zuboff. Innocent hangouts and conversations are embedded in a behavioral engineering project of planetary scope and ambition that is institutionalized in Big Others, and Big Other is the surveillance capitalist architecture and apparatus that she critiques in surveillance capitalism. It's architectures of ubiquitous monitoring, analysis, and control. And their encounter with the self-other balance, teenagers step onto a playing field already tilted by surveillance capital to tip them into the social mirror and keep them fixed on its reflections. Everything depends upon feeding the algorithms that can effectively and precisely bite on him and bite on her and bite on them and not let go. All those outlays of genius and money are devoted to this one goal of keeping users, especially young users, plastered to the social mirror like bugs on a windshield. And this is that wonderful, wonderful woman. Goals. And that's that wonderful, wonderful book. So, in short, the data that's collected by the tools that we use, the institutions through which we are forced to operate are, well, that is a typo. They share data with each other and circulate data amongst each other through very shady contracts and agreements that I technically can't talk about, but I have seen by doing work in certain places, legal work in certain places. Our data is used in innovation analytics research, and other endeavors to capture our consumer loyalty, nurture the profit growth of businesses for which will gain no profits unless, as I was saying earlier, you consider the development of some new product or whatever, some kind of profit for yourself, which you could. Your axiology is beyond the scope of my responsibility, but I just don't think that's profitable. Records of our existential makeup are a roadmap to many iterations of control that are ceded to corporate and other data collectors' interests. In essence, data is our essence, and it's being given away, and well, not even given away, taken away, and used for the sake of other people's profits and developments and R&D. Now, before I move on to data cooperatives, does anyone have any comments, questions, concerns, arguments, frustrations about anything that I just said?
I mean, it's again more about the smart dust again, and like there was a famous talk about how much information can be gleaned about us just from cell phone metadata, and likewise, even if you turn off like the location feature, like permissions for Facebook on your phone, it can still use a lot of context to figure out where you are.
You really don't need much.
Yeah, so...
In fact, actually, the way most people, including Android/Google, do it at the OS level is they can literally just use triangulation of known Wi-Fi points and they can pinpoint you to pixel point accuracy. So yeah, even if you're not using GPS, they easily know where you are.
But yeah, so like in a way that stuff is already here, it's just not in that particular form. But anyway, that just underscores.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that it's not happening now. I'm just, this is, you know.
Also, the commercial term for smart dust, probably some people in this room have heard of it, it's called MIMS actually. So that's how it's being developed essentially.
MIMS?
Yeah.
M-I-M-S?
Yes.
That's stupid.
Microelectromagnetic.
Okay, that's not stupid. Never mind. As long as it stands for something.
Yeah, but smart dust, no joke, was actually the late 90s term those Berkeley professors did coin it with. It was a joke at the time. It was mocking the 90s trend of putting smart on anything. Just like we put blockchain on anything now, or AI on anything now.
You have to forgive me if I'm not the most up-to-date on things. I have spent the last few months literally in a different world, so that's what writing is like.
He's got a book to finish, so we're just happy he had time to give a talk.
All right, so now we're going to actually move on to the thing that brought us here today, the metaphysic of this congregation, data cooperatives. So again, I kind of showcased the book prematurely, but I'll do it again because it's in the slideshow. Building the New Economy, Data is Capital by Alex Pentland, Alexander Lipton, and Thomas Harjano. This is the piece that introduced me to the concept of data cooperatives. I came upon this piece again while working on my book. The reason I was able to find this piece particularly is because I wanted to know what a model for a data-centric society would look like, or an economy. What a data-centric economy would look like and how that society would function. And this kind of details how that would work, kind of. And I thought I was actually going to be taking a peek at the Necronomicon here, and it actually provided me with the concept of the data cooperative, which was riveting, because it was like, oh, there's some yin to this, there's some yang to this yin here. It's not all doom and gloom. We might be able to gain some sense of autonomy here. So what is a data cooperative? Data cooperative is a voluntary collaborative pooling of individuals' personal data for the benefit of the members of the group or the community. One of the motivations is sharing common insights across data that would otherwise be siloed or inaccessible. These insights would provide cooperative members as a whole with a better understanding of their current economic, health, and social conditions as compared to the other members of the cooperative in general. So it would be like providing a nice palette for, a nice platform for community learning and community building. You can kind of understand where everybody's coming from, how everyone's moving. And then one of the last parts is what data cooperatives could cultivate the possibility of individuals being paid or better compensated for the data they create and exercise more pricing power than they would have on their own. So there's some possibility, there's power numbers, right? And so you'll see as I move on that basically data cooperative is kind of like an intermediary, will serve as an intermediary between like third-party companies and ourselves in regards to like analyzing and using our data. There are a lot of roadblocks here because one of the main issues with data law in the United States is that technically whoever collects the data owns the data. So, really getting that information out of the hands of very, very strong corporate elites is rather challenging because we're using their devices. But again, lots of issues, things to solve. Law is a humanitarian issue, not solved by technology. So, how would you build a data cooperative? Also, any questions, any comments, anything? Yes, no, cool, sugoi. Building a data cooperative. So basically, one of the ways that Harjano suggests that you would start building a data cooperative would be going through something like a credit union or any kind of like a community organization that manages any kind of like accounts because they use a lot of the same databases. So all the information would already be kind of in the same place. And so basically what would happen would be the members would come together, or the proposed members come together, they would form a co-op in which they would have to vote on a board. That board would elect certain members to have certain responsibilities. One of the main responsibilities for this particular kind of co-op would be an IT infrastructure committee or something of that nature, which you'll see why in a few seconds here. But essentially they would just build the cooperative, say they want it, go to the institution, make that, claim, whatever, and then kind of start from the ground up. Kind of like starting any kind of organization, just go to somebody and say, hi, I want this to exist. Then you fight tooth and nail until it exists. Let's see. And another obstacle to take note of is that a lot of new regulations and oversight would need to be kind of developed and tailored for the different kinds of APIs, smart contracts, and other technical aspects of the IT infrastructure that the data cooperative would fund. Because that's playing with a lot of sensitive information. Hope that made sense.
Hey, David, I have a question. So, Kevin and I at different times used to work for Polycot Software Co-op, which is a cooperative that the members make decisions on and share the profits. They bring people on as contractors. But they've structured it, I think, as an LLC to have the benefits of the limited liability. And potentially they could spin something off like a different model that would be maybe investment friendly, more investment friendly, say, than an LLC, perhaps. Is this kind of thing do you think it's compatible with that sort of structure?
With an LLC structure?
Like an LLC or some other thing, it's a cooperation, it's a cooperative that's also a corporation.
I mean, insofar as Whole Foods became what it became, I would say yeah. It could. I mean, yeah.
The other thing would be a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization, where you don't have the legal benefits of the limited liability, but there's other advantages. So I'm just wondering, when people have done this, have they looked at structuring it like a corporation?
Well, so
There's also
No.
public benefit corporations I'll flag as well.
one more time.
Public benefit corporations, which are kind of like LLCs, except they don't have pure fiduciary duty. They can reject profit maximization if that would betray the charter of the organization, as it were. I work for a PBC previously.
Oh, I mean, maybe, yes. So I'm not an engineer, an architect, or anything. I'm an analyst. So I look at things, I put things together, like informational-wise. I weave stories. From what I pulled, they don't talk about structuring it like a corporation. I wouldn't say that it's strongly anti-corporate at all, the piece, but it's just not, that's not the vibe of the structure.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's anti because they're fundamentally not rejecting the idea that data does have value. They
Precisely.
just want it to work for the co-op's members.
Exactly. But I think it would be worth investigating. There aren't a lot of data cooperatives, so.
Are there any already? Or are we going to be getting to that?
So Imogen Heap, actually.
Imogen Heap?
Yeah,
Really?
Mycelium is her music artist's data cooperative.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I would definitely be interested in expanding that discussion, though. I hope that answered your question well enough. Okay. Where was I? Okay, done here. Anything else? No? Yes? Moving on. So, functions. What would the data cooperative do once it exists? And it has this thing that we use to hold people's data. So it would host member data on a cloud infrastructure, and that would be on that IT infrastructure that is funded by the cooperative's members. I would hold copies of member data to help represent members in negotiating how their data is used. It would alert members as to how they're being surveilled, audit large companies and government institutions using member data, enable members to improve privacy and transparency regarding the use of their data, and direct that is another typo, and direct their data to the benefit of becoming an intermediary between members and entities seeking to utilize their data. And then currently, citizens and workers really don't have direct representation at negotiation tables in regards to how their data is being used. So, yeah, it would be like having guardians. So, the data cooperative would host a data exchange. The data exchange would exist on the IT infrastructure that is created from the funds that are from the members of the cooperative. And then so the exchange would be run, operated, maintained by the cooperative, or multiple cooperatives that could theoretically operate on the same data exchange. They would curate, navigate, and gather data from many sources to allow third parties to gain insight from such data. So we can, still enjoy these wonderful hyper-interconnected synchronicities that we get to because of how extremely well analyzed we all are by the tools that we use. But again, we would have someone theoretically acting in our true best interest and not just someone, we would have someone acting in our true best interest at the table, making those decisions, and not just people that are going to profit from how those decisions are being made. And another very interesting, I think, aspect of the data co-ops and data exchanges is that by nature of being involved in this trade and this transaction and this economic space, data exchange would be able to like accurately price data by the nature of that participation and just being in it. And that also helps with negotiation in regards to co-op members. And I'll, on the last slide, I'll kind of touch on maybe how members could be compensated for the data that is analyzed or used, or that a third party might pay for to get access to analyze or whatever. It'll make a little more sense, I promise. So one of the things about data exchanges is they would treat data as non-fungible. It's something to be accessed, not traded. I know that that is a rather contradictory name, exchanges, given that you're not trading data, but those are the words that were used, and that's not my idea, so I'm not going to start changing it around because of how I see fit. But what's important about that first line there is that this hits home on that the data would be in one place. So, and the reason the data would be one place is because this infrastructure, the one that they proposed, would be, well, I'm competing with a party right now, would be on a blockchain. And on this blockchain, the member data would be stored, across the nodes, blah, 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 blah. And instead of the data being, given out to people would have to, or organizations or people looking to analyze the data, they would have to come to the data itself. They would run their analyses through these things that were also proposed by the MIT Research Lab called open algorithms. So basically, say Google wanted to look at a set of people's, birth dates. They would, and analyze that for some godforsaken reason. They would go to the data cooperative. The data cooperative would either allow them or reject their request. Upon being allowed, they would have to run an open algorithm on the blockchain itself. So an open algorithm basically moves to where the data is and does the analytics and exports safe answers that would I guess birth date wasn't the best, maybe favorite color. They're looking at favorite colors and give that whatever analysis they're trying to do, provide that those answers or whatnot without, compromising any kind of PI or anything. Again, all the data's in one place. Program moves to where the data's at, does analysis, spits out the answers without compromising any kind of sensitive information. Google never actually touches the data, God, if only, and it's still safe on the IT infrastructure. Does that make sense? Okay.
How would you compare this to something, just in terms of efficacy, to something like a Brave, right? So
like the search engine, or not the search engine?
Where it's product based, right? Because the hang up is whoever collects the data owns the data.
Correct.
And the point of this, I guess, is that you're collecting the data, but you are collecting it after it's already been collected.
So the point is that the members provide the data to the exchange.
Right.
And then
But what I'm saying is it's previously been collected because this is assuming the members are using all of the standard technology suite that they already use.
Correct.
So those companies have already collected that data.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Versus a Brave model, for those who don't know, it's basically a browser that kind of sells your data essentially. But that model, they basically build the product so that they collect the data first.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess I can. You upstood me at my own talk, man. Good job.
I mean, that comes comes back to the legislation point you mentioned earlier, that we would need new, like, policy, like public policy changes to make this possible. Like, if it were, it's hard to imagine from where we are now, but if there was like a legal requirement that companies remove the data that they've been collecting, that would, it seems like actually more science fiction than some of the stuff we talked about earlier.
I mean, I can tell you from having talked about HB4 at the state ledge that, one of the big flaws in the bill I pointed out was it was like they have these provisions where, okay, a company's collected your data in Texas, you can now go to that company and say, please remove the data. Problem was, if they'd already given that data to any third parties, that request didn't apply to any of those third parties they already sent it along to. So I was like, this law has no teeth as currently implemented, basically.
Also, something that I want to point out, this model of data cooperative and data exchange that I'm focusing on is, again, more like fitted for like musical artists. So it's like assuming that they're uploading that specific data into the infrastructure, and then all these analyses are being run and whatnot. I think that, and I'll again touch on this way later on, I think that model can be tailored and changed to better accommodate, like, the example you were like talking about earlier with like how Brave works. But yeah. Okay. But
Well, I guess just also I might chime in to say that, once again, not the tech lawyer on our board, but I will say that I think some of this stuff about even now who owns the data can be a bit hazy, because it's like, for instance, let's say you're using your bank or credit union's mobile phone app. There's a lot of regulations around financial data, like actually after healthcare data, it's the most regulated category of data. And so on one hand, it's like, it's Google's OS, but it's your bank or credit union's app, and it's all highly encrypted, protected financial data. And so who owns that financial data, Google or the bank,
Man, what a fight, Google versus the bank.
Yeah, but also just thinking about the fact there are different kinds of data, and I think this leads into the music industry example that you mentioned coming up, just that artists creating content like that, even if that is one area where theoretically, right, even if the genie goes out of the bottle, right, like we have a famous unfortunate example of that. If your nudes get leaked on the internet, it's easier to get them taken down with like copyright infringement complaints.
Yes, that is the best way if you want to disrupt the internet.
Than
Find
anything else.
copyrighted content in the news.
But what that tells us is that there is some teeth to copyright claims, and so it would be possible for things you're creating, theoretically.
And I guess me looking at all this, maybe we'll get this in some later slides. One place where I think without actually having to change existing laws too much, you could potentially get benefits, which is, first of all, essentially the data cooperative, yes, you still have all the issues of you're using, and well, a rich cloud, a rich data cooperative could in theory buy their own servers, or use one that prioritizes privacy and security cloud solution, something like Data Foundry, which is based here in Austin. But even if somebody was using one of the more main commercial clouds like AWS, GCP, or Google, you still could potentially have some kind of shared web presence where the members are at least all keeping their data there, such that at least, and this is really where I see it potentially starting to become useful, which is, okay, rather than every member of the data cooperative, say, having to make an account on Amazon if they want to order stuff, there's one account, the data cooperative's account. So Amazon's still getting data, but it's actually almost anonymized by definition because it's just one account and all the members' orders, basically. So even without changing laws, I think doing stuff like that, you could start getting some kind of intermediary benefits here. On the flip side, once again, the decentralist piece says anytime you centralize something, even with the data cooperative, well, it's important that the cooperative's governance stays serving the members, or you just now have a new gatekeeper who's hurting people.
100. Kevin, how are we on time?
Oh, we have plenty of time, We have the room till 9. It's only 8:04.
It's 8:04. Okay, cool. Sick. So, just a little on open algorithms. To make broad arrays of data available for analysis without violating privacy. Again, the algorithm goes where the data is, royally exchanged as opposed to the data being exported. Safe answers, data is encrypted. It's kind of redundant, I'm sorry y'all. Let's go. All right, so now.
Wait, did you want to see that slide? Oh, go back real quick, somebody wanted to see that slide.
Yeah, go for it. And if anyone wants copies of this presentation when I'm done with it, cool. Just let me know. Give me your email address and I will.
I know, I'm going to want the slides here because somebody watching the live stream can't see the screen very well, but they do want the slides.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault, it's that we didn't have a good projector, so it is what it is.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
All right. I thought it was Rob Zombie. So
I had nothing to do with the booking in there tonight, so
It's
apologies if I was
fine.
distracting anyone. Oh wait, did it just boot you out?
yep.
Oh, there it is, okay. I was like, do I have to go hunt down AV? No.
No, you don't. Thank God. Okay. Before I move on to a data cooperative for artists and musicians, any questions? I feel like we had a really good volley of conversation a few seconds
I
Oh.
was
ago.
gonna say, originally you were talking about like problem with like websites and stuff, it's like you give them the data and they own it. You see data co-ops as like entering that relationship and like improving that situation at all?
I see data co-ops as, like I said, being an intermediary and being a possibility for users having someone at the table that will at least represent them and try to like keep them kind of existentially safe.
And actually, I think I can give an interesting fight that's been going on in the privacy community where a data cooperative might actually offer an improvement, which is there's a very controversial thing going on with Firefox right now where they're pushing what they call privacy-preserving attribution, which they claim as a safe, anonymous way to make money from advertisements without jeopardizing users' privacy. This has met pushback from a lot of the privacy community because they pointed out that the anonymizing ad server, it is true that it is aggregating and anonymizing browsers. By the way, this feature can be turned off in Firefox. By the way, still, it's not mandatory. But it's true, the ad server that Firefox then uses to send data to advertisers is anonymizing all the individual users' data. Here's the problem, and actually where maybe a data cooperative might help. Firefox controls that server. It would be incredibly easy for them to collude with advertisers and de-anonymize it, basically. If a third party was controlling the privacy-preserving attribution server, i.e. a data cooperative, it might be a little more safe to have your cake and eat it too, where, you know, if you fund the internet because it's not free, we've gotten to this horrible place where it's either free and be spied on or pay and don't be spied on. If you think privacy is a human right, that's not an acceptable solution. I have to agree with the people who say that Mozilla is being very shady with this. Maybe data cooperatives could be a little better. By the way, if you're fed up with Firefox over things like this, there are more hardcore privacy browsers like MoleMatch you might look into.
I was gonna say, it sounds like you would like give out Mozilla protecting privacy and data cooperative.
I mean, I feel for Mozilla where they are because, you know, they may be about to lose their Google revenue because Google's rightly been found a monopolist, and that puts them in a very hard position. So I get why they're tempted to do stuff like this. Still not a fan of it.
One more thing. Along with this idea, the first thing I thought was like maybe a world where if you sign up for a website, it's more like you just attach your data cooperative to them and then they're kind of licensed to use it.
That's what I was imagining, kind of
All right.
where this could go as well.
Data cooperative editors.
Kevin, I want to thank you for providing a literal and immediate practical application of this concept to something that's actual real. So,
I'm
Thank you.
here to be your wingman. I'm here to empower your talk.
I only say what the gods tell me to say. You have actual things. So,
Look, this has been a fascinating talk. You're doing great. Keep going.
all right. So, in order to understand why a data cooperative for musical artists would exist, took a little bit of understanding some issues with the music industry. So this is disgustingly simple. This is not at all how like complex it is, but this is just what I boiled it down to for the sake of ease. So basically, I mean, it doesn't even start how it looks because a streaming platform, the artist gives their works, whatever, to distributors, which is labels. Labels give the permission to streaming platforms to use these works. And a lot of artists get screwed out of a lot of money in this process here. So basically, with streaming services in particular, what'll happen is, and again, this is a use case from the book. I did not make this up. Did not, just applying to knowledge. The music industry use case was kind of the initial use case that they discussed. Again, it's the more simple one. A lot less you need to understand to get there, but anyway, sorry. So one of the major problems with the music industry, with artists being screwed over for royalties, is that a lot of money just gets put into a black box stage. And to sum it up, the black box is money left over. Let me start from the beginning. Still wrapping my head around this one, guys. Streaming services reach out to labels, distributors, etc., to get access to the library of music content that are provided by artists. What happens is the streaming service pays the label after enough royalties have been accumulated, and then the royalties get, appropriately distributed. Well, not appropriate. Get distributed to artists. Now, there's like a quota basically that gets met, and after that quota of we've bought this contract, we've paid off this contract to use this musical library, there's still a lot of money that gets left over, more money gets made. And instead of adequately paying the royalties to the artists, the label just basically accepts the leftover new money from the streaming service as like payment to just restart a new contract. So artists don't have their funds directly routed to them and aren't compensated directly for all of their work. Again, very, very hairy, lots of red tape. Does that make sense to everyone? Anyone? Yes?
There are movies, a playlist in Netflix about Spotify, about this problem, how they solve it, how they steal data and everything else. The playlist.
There's a
The playlist is
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Oh, the playlist.
About this
About
scam of
Spotify.
pocketing the money they're
Yeah,
doing.
yeah. And how artists screw up and everything. Not works for artists, it's works for Spotify.
This is also a great illustration of the larger phenomenon of how mass culture supplants and crowds out local culture, while not filling the same needs that local culture does.
Sick.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's also just somebody leveraging their power in a relationship, because basically, even though this extra money is technically owed back, the person with the power is basically saying, well, I'm just going to pocket it, and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, it sucks. It's bad. It's labor abuse. Okay. So, and the transition to the digital age has, made it worse. And then, a Sound Exchange is actually a music nonprofit. John Simpson basically thinks that the poor data that is owned by these labels exacerbates the issue. And the data is poor because it's not, there's no standard way to file and notate things, which is something that this particular use case touches on. As you'll see, metadata is actually the kind of key to the solution of this problem per this use case. So again, lack of consistent authoritative information or metadata And then you have multiple entities on the supply chain, the musical supply chain, basically replicating data. And as data gets replicated, it gets hard to like trace things back to where they're supposed to go, who's supposed to get what, who's supposed to get compensated. It's a mess. And then metadata gets mixed up with ownership data, and ownership changes frequently, and that just makes things even more of a mess. So, some solutions provided by the Music Industry Data Co-op. It would host the creation data and registry metadata on the IT infrastructure. So again, we're assuming at this point that a bunch of artists have come together and valiantly invested in their own data cooperative, and they have this very ethical, well-functioning board that makes sure that everyone's treated right, and they've hired the best, well-informed architects and software engineers to build this wonderful blockchain infrastructure that will host their data. Is that in everyone's head? Because you're gonna have to hold on to that as we move through these next couple of slides here. Some more solutions provided would be licensing and other bureaucratic administrative issues that confusion that I was talking about that I didn't even put on the board would be solved by a lot of different APIs and smart contract features. And then of course this same infrastructure would have a distributed ledger that automates a lot of other functions and tasks regarding rights and licensing. And compensation as well. So again, it will be a blockchain hosting appropriate APIs that accommodate the needs of the industry. The blockchain nodes would serve as repository for the metadata files and the creation data files. I'll get into this in a second, but basically the actual song gets separated from the metadata once it's inside of the infrastructure, once it's on the ledger. But we'll touch on that in a second because it's kind of important. And so that kind of leads into this next point, that there would be multiple layers on this data exchange. There would be a metadata registry layer, a rights, licensing, and royalty layer, and a virtual asset layer. The first layer is going to take a minute, so I'm going to focus on the second two first, because again, like I said, the metadata is kind of what moves things along in the workflow of this theoretical, well-functioning, highly ethical, state-of-the-art blockchain. All right, so the rights, license, and royalties layer would enable the centralized management of music rights ownership, music rights trading, license issuance, collection, and distribution of royalties. Utilize smart contracts to perform business transactions and license assignments. And again, it strongly depends on the metadata layer to perform transactions and assignments. Everything from the other two layers always leads back to the metadata layer. The music virtual assets layer is basically what would allow for the distribution of funds through a token system. You provide the data, you get a token signifying that you're an owner or a partial owner. And then eventually this layer would go across various different trading networks and operate on this very perfect, beautiful global scale, which is a subject for future research and development according to the book. So the metadata layer. Metadata storage and security on a distributed metadata registry ledger. So the metadata would be time the song was made, the name of the person that made it, what kind of piano was used, what kind of keyboard was used, all kinds of subparts to the piece. This layer would have multiple copies of the registry metadata via the network of nodes. So, and because it would be replicated across nodes, that's how a lot of security would be ensured, because the nodes would communicate. And what's up? Are you?
I'm just curious. I know you were mostly just reporting their case study, basically.
Yes.
I don't know if they get into this or if you did some research into it, but one of the things that you run into often with blockchain solutions that is a problem with them is that if incorrect data, like say the wrong person owns this song, gets into the blockchain, it can be very hard for people to correct that. Do they talk about like error correction at all?
They don't in detail, but they do note revision as a key design principle.
Well, that's good. Okay, they addressed one of my major concerns with their architecture. That's good.
That was a thing that they said needs to happen or be possible. Let's see, what else? So yeah, communication between nodes is what would ensure that security. Or through the digital identity management features to the metadata layer, cryptographic key management, and protected access to musical works, recordings, and files. So here are some of those principles. Capture and create the metadata, separate it from the ownership data, and so this is going to be weird, but I'll show you a kind of a makeshift model of what the file would look like. But essentially, the ownership data and the metadata would be separated, but they would still be linked by a digital object identifier, so that whenever something happens with a smart contract regarding the song, the digital object identifier would point whatever requisites needed to be resolved or whatever back to the content, the creation data, the ownership data. That's how that's
blockchain-based pointers, essentially, because copying large files is expensive. It's the same reason C invented pointers in the first place.
Precisely. Other design principles: cryptographic hash for mapping between the metadata and the work. Header and descriptor standards that would solve some of the organizational issues with like just labeling and formatting data that exists currently in the music industry. Digital signatures for metadata with unique identifier that distinguishes it from other metadata units. And signed metadata files, more unique identifiers, ledger-based notarization, support for multiple versions, support for revisions of metadata as Kevin requested, and open access to archived metadata for copyright support, for copyright claim support, reference to other ledger systems, and digital identity and public key binding. So, yes?
So how exactly does this model prevent someone from coming and turning into an emerald mine?
An emerald mine?
Yeah.
Like literal emeralds?
Referring to someone who has poor taste in trucks.
Poor taste? I didn't hear you. Poor taste in what?
In trucks.
Someone
with money
Mr.
coming in
M.
and basically turning this into another Spotify, but with different guts.
Well, again, that goes back to it's a humanitarian issue. I mean, technology is agnostic. I think that this could go very poorly. I think this could be a nightmare. In fact, I've turned this into a nightmare in my writing. But,
and I guess this is an interesting question. So, I, for years, I've been seeing people proposing blockchain as a solution to artists actually controlling their songs and getting compensated, getting paid, and, cynically, a lot of those solutions have not borne fruit up till now, and I say this as somebody who likes decentralization, but, it hasn't always worked out so far. I guess I'm wondering if maybe one idea behind like the data cooperative, maybe addressing some of these, is I've always thought part of the problem has been that blockchain, to really understand how it works, especially when you're getting into smart contracts and DApps, it's very complicated, and artists mostly just want to make their art and not have to become an expert on distributed programming. Is the idea sort of that the data cooperative would like employ the technical experts to essentially manage this for the artists, more or less?
Yeah. And sorry to.
No, he asked the first question. Yeah.
I don't mean to not answer your question, but something I was saying, I don't know if you were here earlier, is that a lot of issues are humanitarian, and it sucks that you can't just say that this technology is incorruptible, but nothing's incorruptible. There's nothing stopping this from becoming a tool of true evil any more than anything else.
Because for every dollar that an artist earns, 90 cents of those are from touring, and tchotchkes they sell at concerts are 95%. I don't know, it's a number out there, but they make very, very little off of sales of songs, or
Right.
pieces of them.
And it's actually interesting how digital tech has completely inverted the artist business model, because it used to be that things like going to the show was what was cheap and practically free back in the late 70s, because they made money on the thing that was expensive and limited, the actual album. Now, because of digital stuff, the actual song itself is worthless. It's all about the touring and the merch now, and that's what's expensive.
All right, and move on now. More on the data registry later. Would have the publication assign a registry metadata file of musical works, and the registry provide legal support for copyright claims on the part of the creator. These ledgers would be readable by the public and become a public source that can be referenced by smart contracts and other ledger-based transactions. Metadata units would be movable and copyable from one repository to another. Independent standard APIs that write and reads to the metadata, communicates with it. And then you have standardized data format and signature maintenance during metadata file exports. The signatures are again for like authorizations and authentication purposes. So this is what a metadata file unit would look like.
This is the block on the blockchain and what is in that block, more or less.
Yes.
Okay.
So you got your DOI, which points to the work, information on the work, the place where the work exists, and then a signature of a public key of the issuer. It's really cute. I like it. I don't know why, but it's cool.
I guess another, this is, once again, I know you're just reporting this use case, and as you said, you yourself see tons of problems with this. So this is more just me pointing out as the programmer things that I see based on, I remember when NFTs were the whole thing, and I was, the thing I was just laughing about was about how it doesn't matter what it says on the blockchain if you don't actually control the server. And I looked and say, like, okay, so there's a cryptographic hash of where the sound file is, but who actually controls that server that the sound file is actually on? This thing saying you own it doesn't necessarily mean anything if somebody controls the servers where the file actually is.
Precisely. lots of holes, lots of things to be investigated, lots of questions to be asked. Okay, so this is how the workflow would work for an artist using this state-of-the-art, wonderful, incorruptible system. So the artist uploads their sound files to the repository. The uploaded work is separated into creation data and metadata. Metadata and creation data are linked to the digital object identifier that I discussed earlier, and artists are then provided with a token of ownership. Streaming service, I left that part out, sorry. Streaming service requests access to the library or to the work of the artist.
Okay, so that's somewhat addresses what I just said. The idea is supposed to be that the streaming service itself does not have access or permission to the actual servers with the actual songs. If they get a token, they're then allowed to whatever server actually has the songs, they've been essentially given an access token
They
to
get
retrieve it.
a key or a token through the rights and license and royalties layer.
Okay, that's better.
And then, so the streaming service then uploads the content to their platform or references it to their platform through the DOI, allowing their subscribers to access not the activist created content, the artist created content. And then through a series of smart contracts and APIs and other tech magic, funds are distributed to the artist via the validation of the artist's virtual asset tokens that they received up here when they first submitted uploaded their file to the infrastructure. So that's how that would work. And then I've taken this and kind of changed it. I mean, this is me
Thinking how we would use this for data cooperatives in general.
Yeah, I have no business putting this together. That's
Okay,
why.
no,
That's why you guys are.
As a programmer, I'd be happy to workshop.
Tell
this
me
with you.
how and why I'm wrong, please, because clearly. So I imagine that an app, tool, service user creates data, so make a post on Facebook, on Instagram, do something on some platform while using a data collection tool operated and created by their data cooperative. So I was imagining something kind of like Brave, actually. For some reason I was thinking of it like a VPN, which is not at all what it is, but like some kind of like dragnet basically that you log into. And then you start using these tools so that it collects and records what you're doing. And then that metadata and the content data that is then uploaded from whatever tool the data cooperative creates into the data cooperative's repository. And that version of the files is separated into creation metadata. And then metadata and creation data are then linked by a digital object identifier, and then the user from step 1 is provided the token of ownership. And then, so say, and this kind of disrupts the industry a little bit, because this, right now, third parties can just go straight to Google, Amazon, etc., and do a contract of some sort to get access to whatever data they're looking for. In this scenario, the data cooperative would be the third party or would be the person, the brokerage basically, that the third party would go to do whatever analytics it's looking for. But anyway, so the third party usually seeking to perform some kind of analytics on the cooperative's member data sends a file request to the data cooperative. The data co-op assesses the risks, benefits, and possible compensation and allows the analysis. And if approved, the third party provides the data co-op with its open algorithm. The open algorithm I discussed earlier. The algorithm completes its analytics by going onto the system. The third party never actually gets the data, but they do get the analytics they need. Safe answers are provided, and then the third party compensates the data co-op for the data used, whatever particular data they looked at. And then the data co-op reimburses members using similar metadata and token functionality that I kind of talked about with the artists and musician data cooperative. So basically, that token that the user received would basically be how whatever compensation is sent to them would be sent to them. My mouth is tired. I'm sorry. No.
Well, me looking at this, I actually am thinking, this would be viable with actually, I think, if you mandated one key law, this actually might be kind of viable, which is already there's a concept for those who don't know in computing that all modern computers use called trusted platform modules. They're controversial in some ways because they're viewed as like ultimately giving people like Google or Microsoft or Apple more control over your device than you do. But in theory, they're supposed to be a safe execution environment where things are encrypted and bad actors can't get them, blah, 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 blah. If you had a law mandating, TPMs, they're hardware, but they can also be software-based, essentially. If you had a law mandating that if you have kind of a data cooperatives app, essentially running on your phone, acting as your intermediary, well, if that app also comes with a software TPM, if you had a law mandating that the OS maker, like Google or Apple, has to respect a third-party TPM, essentially, then essentially you could have a situation where without the phone's OS being able to spy on you, the data you generate would then be provided to the data cooperative, and then yes, the Googles of the world would not have your data. They would have to then go to the data cooperative and license your data, essentially.
So how do we make that happen?
I don't know, go yell at your lawmakers.
Oh, I love doing that.
I don't know, listen. Oh, yeah. I mean, they occasionally do, but usually you have to have self-interest for them in some way. But yeah, and I mean, there may be problems with I just spitball too, but I'm just thinking software-wise combined with some smart laws, I could see it potentially having some merit.
And that was more the point. I have no solutions to anything, but I'm good at delusion and hope. And I feel like this is, while not providing solid, solution, that's a step in the direction, I think, towards kind of really thinking about and starting the conversation of what, gaining autonomy in this data
I
scape.
think the key insight actually that I'm seeing here, which is interesting to think about, is the idea that the big tech surveillance economy, that essentially they would not have direct access to our data. There would be an API where in exchange for payment, they could request access to our data from our data fiduciary, the data cooperative, and basically they wouldn't be the only ones with the power in the relationship. And that the data itself doesn't exist out in public, just an API to request it. The actual data is encrypted and private and not on the open web, actually.
100.
So, I mean, devil's in the details, but I think the overall idea is an interesting one to consider.
And also, like, it's just as there's a reactionary project of, like, imagining the decline and things getting worse and worse. If we want to build a better future, we have to imagine it. Otherwise, we'll never be able to get there on purpose. So, yeah.
Well, and as, I think to that point, yes, everything is corruptible because everything's built out of humans. And if humans behave badly, no system can protect you from humans behaving badly. But I've known tons of people who behave very well. So that means that things can also be good as well.
Yeah, I think also, again, like, talking about, like, the difference between massive, like, mass culture scale versus locality, I think these kinds of things could have a very, like, rely more upon that type of trust at a smaller scale, more in a specific place.
The technical term for this in terms of data is called subsidiarity, which is the idea that the negative externality of data is less harmful the closer in location to where the data was created or generated.
I think we had a
Is your question?
Yeah, I have a quick comment.
Or yeah, sure.
I actually tried to take a crack at this, solving this problem technically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of communities on Reddit and what have you that are really obsessed with local data and having a situation where a community posts their own local servers and that pipes directly to their phone and all the apps to their phone. Yeah, it was a fun project. I learned a lot about local data and how local data manifests in the world.
What architecturally are usually the big problems you run into that's made it hard to actually make these solutions happen at mass scale?
At mass scale, well, my approach was to do completely open source software from top to bottom. And these communities, for example, I wanted a canonical chat app that would work with the canonical open source photo app. And these communities don't talk to each other. They're all people who, work in their like little closed environments. And it was super hard to advocate in these open source communities to say, hey, if we build and we work together, we can have an ecosystem that's even better than Apple's, an ecosystem that's even better than Google's, and we can host it locally. But that advocacy, I'm an engineer, I code. That advocacy was really hard.
Politics, it's politics.
Yes. But yeah, I think once they got the vision, I got it through them, they're like, oh, I'll write this extra code so the music app can work with the, whatever.
It's getting a single protocol, a single standard that all these little projects will agree to interoperate on, basically.
It wasn't even, maybe, but I think it was just like, hey, there's this open source project here that would really dovetail well and would have this like coherence as an ecosystem. And that was the big challenge for me, is just to make sure that they saw that vision and they're like, wow, we could build a crazy good ecosystem that synergistically works well together. But I would have to deal with this guy who's in Germany, who's building it in this, and it was really political.
Yeah, everybody I know who's ever dived really deep into open source projects has assured me that, yes, from the outside it all looks very utopian. It's all politics in these projects.
And people have their fiefdoms and people are protective about their pet projects that, got them jobs or whatever, so.
Is the project still alive?
Yeah, you can go to the website.
What's its name for everything?
Sway.
Sway.
So you can just go to beta.sway.rocks, ROCKS.
Is that something you would like projected onto the screen? Or no?
Yeah, you can
Okay, cool. I just want to like just
Yeah, go ahead.
throw the stuff. Okay. Can you tell me the name again?
Beta.sway.rocks.
Beta.sway.
Yeah, SWAY.
Okay, that's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Ooh.
Sick.
That looks good.
Android phone and Linux proficiency required.
Well, that's to deploy your own local community server.
Gotcha.
That's not for the average user.
Gotcha.
So those are like curated services. Like there's one there called Funk Whale, And Funk Whale has like, it's basically like a no-brainer for artists to set up their own Funk Whale server and to charge to have access to their Funk Whale pod.
Man, you lead with Arch Linux.
Yeah, well, that's just to manage the server. This is a very, so originally I had
Even I haven't been brave enough to try Arch.
So originally I had it envisioned as a hacker's ecosystem,
Right.
and then slowly it evolved into other things. But this is just a directory of the software I would use. This isn't anything special except the software that I've curated, and I haven't curated it for a long time. There's like better in class software for all these things now.
Still very cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, check that out, that was really cool. I know some of that software you know, it's sweet.
What's this again?
Beta.sway.rock.
Yeah, very cool.
So that was my last slide. Does anyone have any questions, any other comments?
Maybe coming back to the central idea, so having a person, like an intermediary agent for you, like regarding your personal data. I was wondering how does it relate, or does it relate to what Google and Meta are already doing, this, is it called single sign-on, where you basically log in some other places with your Google or Meta identity, so that
To an extent.
like, do they sort of...
To an extent. So like single sign-on also is kind of, it's built on top of a actually open technology and protocol called OAuth, basically. So it often is, it's sort of this thing where, yes, on the one hand, the idea is small websites don't know how to properly encrypt passwords. And so the idea is by using the OAuth and the single sign-on, a Google or Meta who does know how to do it correctly, then you're not compromising your account. Of course, on the flip side, you're giving this big tech company some control over your account, some of your login. But OAuth is an open source technology. You don't actually have to use Google or Facebook as your OAuth.
So the data core could, in theory, fill that.
Yeah, and there are
That
non.
doesn't give you data, that doesn't give you access to the data that's taking place whenever that communication happens. It's just for that
It's just
initial
for the
authentication.
identity.
Right, it's for that initial authentication. Once you're on the website, whoever controls the servers of that website, whatever third-party JavaScript they're running, well, it has the data. But yes, but you are right in broad principle that, yeah, and I think this is the key idea where like, and this, I say this as a programmer, that I think this is a place where sometimes these idealistic, open source, very techy projects go wrong, which is not everybody is like me, where it's just like, I find this stuff inherently fascinating and I'm going to put in the work of getting all this hard technical stuff to work. If we don't find solutions that non-technical people can benefit from, then we're not actually being activists, we're just being hobbyists, basically. And basically, yeah, thank you. And so, like for instance, that is why we joke about Arch Linux, but that's why I'm happy that there are now distros like Mint or Ubuntu that are making it easier for non-technical people, because you can't get people on Linux desktop if they're having to manage their drivers 24/7. And so I think that is one of the, just like how we have lawyers, because we can't all be experts on the law. I think the idea with a data cooperative can be like, we can't all be experts on how to safeguard our data, but if we have a company whose whole financial incentive and even legal fiduciary duty is keeping our data safe, because the data model of a Meta, the business model of a Meta is to spy on us, or Google. That's how they make their money. And basically, you can have capitalism fight capitalism. What if we have a company whose whole business model is fighting for its users on behalf of this, basically? So, yeah, we can laugh at maybe some of the holes in some specific proposed technical implementations, but I do think there is something here where you always have to trust somebody, but if you can align the incentives so that they have every reason to fulfill your trust, it's in their financial interest, then there may be something there.
If it's a cooperative, then you're trusting your community of users to kind of maintain that trust collectively rather than some kind of like.
And I know it's very easy with
corporate overlord or whatever.
And I know it's very easy with a lot of the technological and sometimes paranoid communities we can all be members of, not entirely without reason. It can be scary to acknowledge we should ever have to trust anyone, but at the same time, even the most technically competent person among us cannot literally build a modern computer entirely from the hardware up from scratch. Like, there was
Only in Minecraft.
well, there was a guy about 10 years ago, I think, actually went on the, I think I want to say it was the Colbert Report, where he actually made a project of, could I build my entire own computer literally from scratch? And he meant it. Like, he actually did metallurgy to mine the metal. He actually was like, I'm going to, without having to trust or depend on anyone, make entirely my own computer. It took him something like 5 years, tens of thousands of dollars, and it was a piece of shit with horrible processing power that couldn't communicate to anything else. So we do have to actually trust other human beings at a certain level. At a certain point.
That's one of them. There's like nanotechers, which is like basically that, like one piece of the computer stack. You start with the circuits, the AND gates, and the flip flops, and you go all the way up through the, the hardware, the higher virtual chain operating system. You control all of that, and you can, have insight into the whole thing.
That's it. Oh, and David, I'm going to share something with signal and image. Could you potentially put it on the screen here? Because I actually do have an announcement here.
Let me unplug this for a second though, because I don't want all of my signal messages on the screen.
That is fair. I appreciate that. But I have a thingy that we'd like to get projected on the screen here, so just 1 second. Because I'm happy to say, as I told you all at the beginning of this presentation, we were wanting to have a nice shiny new Venmo donate for you all, but we ran into technical difficulties where apparently our great treasurer has resolved those. So if you all enjoyed the presentation and want to remunerate us, you can celebrate our new Venmo here. So let me share that here. All right, David, so if you want to put that image up on the screen. And once again, no obligation, just wanted to celebrate, because we've been meaning to do that for a while. But anyway, David, did you have any final thoughts or things you wanted to share with us?
No, that was it. Again, just...
Do we have any final questions for David? Although I think it's already been a very nice, interesting discussion. Well, in that case...
I want to ask something.
What is your book about and when can I get it?
I'm not going to tell you exactly what it's about, but it is...
So yes, if you want to give us money, that'll... Yes, sorry.
Thanks, Kevin. Cyberpunk speculative fiction piece that discusses fighting our consciousness in an extremely technocratic world with some touch of the occult and Jungian parapsychology. Yes.
Yeah, and actually I will say David, has been working on this book since I've known him in some capacity. Very happy to hear he's almost finished. We will probably try to see if we can have any sort of event to book people for him if we can ever get that done here.
Does this analogy work for you? An individual prepper who's worried about keeping the lights on compared to community solar. That's how I would compare data collectors. In other words, instead of me thinking about my data, protecting my data from rapacious corporations or governments, then it would be a we kind of thing doing it. So does that analogy kind of...
Yes,
okay.
that's about where I'm...
It's basically saying community and trust is not a bad thing, but it's keeping it at maybe a level that the human brain is more adapted for, not these mega structures of the corporation or the nation where it's just harder to coordinate at that scale.
Gotcha.
Anyway, first of all, make sure we give David a big round of parking validation, I have them, so come get them from me. And two, we usually all go have a drink in the lobby to chit chat. We welcome all of you to join us. If not, we will see you next month. Thank you all for coming out and supporting us as always. Next month, as I said, we'll be having a little chat about quantum computers. So if you've ever wanted to learn a little more about them, it should be a fun time. Thank you all so much.
Kevin?
Yes, that'll be happening.
Kevin, how much longer can we leave this up?
Say what?
How much longer can we leave this up?
Just for a sec. Anybody who wants to use it can. I did not mean to talk you and David. When too many of these are going on, my brain doesn't always fire on which thing I need to do.
It was funny. It was funny. I promise. I was.
And then check on it maybe like tonight. Nearby, where it's about chilling and we used to go to a pool bar for instance. So what's your name?
Yeah, Chris. Yeah, also, do you know Shelby?
Makes sense, baby.
So she actually does like privacy advocacy and.
But yeah,
And I feel like she would be really interesting to have.
But I especially because we see so much thing that these days.
Oh yeah, I'm waiting for him to tell me when to unplug that. Oh, what's your name? Michael. Thank you for coming. Did you get something out of it? What did you think?
I'd like to say that's kind of what I was
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I said. In fact, they suggest using credit unions to kind of stem from a data problem. Yeah, because they use a lot of the same kind of data programs across different regions, so they make it easier to just get everything in the same place.
What motivated you?
I'm writing a book, and I needed to understand data as currency better. That led me to this, and this led me to data marketing. Yeah, fiction. Writing fiction is what brought me here. David.
I am Rick. So you're writing fiction. In fact, you read a lot, right?
Yes. I read a lot, I write a lot, yeah.
You like reading long and complicated books.
I do, yeah. I mean, look, here's some other ones I got. I got this. Got some Zen literature. Lots of dense things. Yeah, did you enjoy the...
Yeah, I did. I think the central idea is, really straightforward, actually, in a certain sense, right? And it's not, I think you can get lost in sort of the technicalities and blockchain. Does it work? Does it not work? Will human corrupt it or not? Yada, yada. But the basic idea, I think, is very sound and not very far-fetched at all. Because I think, like, the analog to the banks, I think it's like where do I put my money? Right? There's some agent who takes care of everything,
administers that,
right? Administers that, and the bank can be a co-op, right? But it can also be an LLC or whatever, a company and for profit and everything. It's just but it provides a function, and whether it's a co-op or a for-profit company, it's just a form. But I think the having an intermediary that is theory in your interest is the data. It's just a different structure, and I think it makes perfect sense. It's just a technical challenge whether it's just Amazon where you don't have that much personal data, which is probably easy.
Yeah.
And then maybe more complicated software as a service, something where the software, the data you provide is more complicated. But I think that's the basic idea.
Yeah, I'm glad, because my whole point was like to give us like some kind of like idea of how to use it. Because the way things are working now is just not, it's not great.
But I think that can be very simple, I think.
Okay. Good. What do you do by trade, by the way?
Huh?
What do you do for?
I just stumbled on here out of curiosity. I'm here just for a week visiting from Europe. I'm at a conference tomorrow.
What kind of conference?
Web scraping.
Oh, cool.
Like summit or something. It's at the domain.
Okay.
Somewhere. Tomorrow and Thursday.
For web scraping?
For web scraping, from the site, I think they did there's an open source, the Python scraping package, scraping, whatever. And they did the open source thing, and they I'm a co-founder of a company, and we work with them, and I thought we're doing more and more web scraping. We first outsourced it to them, but now we have to do it by ourselves, and that's why I thought, okay, I'll just go there and get some insight.
What's your company?
It's basically a data company. What we do, we collect data from about gastronomy objects like bars, restaurants, and something like basically addresses and other metadata, and then information about the food and drinks offerings, their food menus and drinks menus.
Okay.
And collect that to a database, and then the idea is to using that data to help drinks companies, food companies, and marketing and sales.
Very active area.
Yeah.
So lots of possibilities.
Yeah. Like we had no idea about it, so we just looked for an interesting project which has like a little bit of data, a little bit of AI, a little bit of cloud computing.
Which city are you based in?
I live in Hamburg, but my other two co-founders are in Berlin. So the company is based in Berlin.
I see.
And currently our clients are mainly Germany and Austria and Switzerland.
Germany and EFF is kind of gastronomy for everything.
Yeah.
That's a whole. You get it going there, you can get it going anywhere.
Yeah. We had like some. We was actually talking to people in the US at some point, but it didn't really.
It's a little bit different way.
It's different. Like the market is like especially when it comes to alcoholic drinks, because actually most of our clients are alcoholic spirits companies like Campari or beer breweries, and that really works. But especially the alcoholic drinks market is structured in a different way in each country. Like Germany has a very complicated structure, and I think the US is highly regulated. That's different again, and the UK is completely different again. Because we're talking to people in the UK, it's all the pubs and the huge pub chains, completely different structures.
A lot of work to do, but there seems like a lot of expertise in all this.
Yeah. There is a need. Because what happens in bars and restaurants is actually it's not transparent to the drinks companies. They have no idea what's going on there, but it's really important to them because the brand is built. So like what is important, what trends are going, it's all in the bar.
Gentlemen, have
The bar.
Speaking of drinks, I don't know if I'll get a drink.
This is the EFF, and they should have some information about any questions and stuff. But this is where you should start if you're like Houston or EFF. But yes, email me and talk, because I know plenty of people at EFF. I'm happy to try to assist you in bootstrapping another one, because I would love it if we didn't have to handle all the Texas celebs and open Austin. Well, sir, I think I have enough compassion to basically essentially take over Austin. I look forward to it. Pleasure to meet you, sir. Thanks for coming out. I hope if you ever back in Austin and it lines up for meetup. I'll probably come back here in 6 months. Well, as I said, I'll be here every few years. I'll look for your face in 6 months.
Right, so usually people need to figure out which of those two things they're doing, so you're not doing apples to oranges comparisons, so. Anyway, I was going to say, I think you are on my list for Austin Science Network still, but we're doing one at Friday.
I am.
Okay.
I look at the topics and I think about going, and one of these days I'll get through time.
One of these days. So we're doing one Friday on campus. A guy who's a really brilliant biochemist from UC Santa Cruz is exploring on, I think it's on just getting really gigantic molecules through membranes.
Okay.
Which is pretty significant for drug development. And then the one next month is us and EFF Austin, a super brainiac, cool friend of mine, PhD in physics, is doing intro to quantum computing.
Okay.
Which is going to be a lot of fun.
That's going to be
That's going to be, a month from tonight.
I'll look out for it.
Yeah, everyone's welcome to these things.
Okay, cool.
All right, good seeing you.
Next time.
Yeah. Let me know if there's any position over at UC that could use my help, okay?
Well, thanks for letting me know about that.
Yeah, take care, man. Thank you.